What's going on, friends? Buying a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, for a lot of people, this has been a dream of theirs for a very long time. So when you finally save up enough money, you finally find the right motorcycle that you feel is right for you, this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Because if you've waited to buy a Harley-Davidson for so long, it's literally a once-in-a-lifetime because you only get to buy your absolute first Harley-Davidson once. Now, the main thing when it comes to buying your first Harley-Davidson, you not only want to consider the bike, the engine, and make sure all of that is going to meet your needs, but you also have to consider yourself as well. Are you willing to work on it? What are you willing to do to it? And how much are you willing to spend on it? Now, when you're shopping for a new motorcycle, the first thing that comes to mind is, do I want a touring bike? Do I want something kind of sporty? Do I want something that's kind of midway in between? Maybe something like a sport tourer. Now, Harley-Davidson, throughout all model years, they do have motorcycles that will fit every need. You can buy any Harley-Davidson and make it into anything you want. You can make it sporty, you can make it a touring bike, or you can kind of fall in between with a sport tourer. But that's just only half of the equation here. As a new buyer, you need to make sure that, what I'm getting at here is, you need to take a look at your mechanical ability. Now, I would honestly say that older Harley-Davidsons, obviously, you're probably going to have some more issues with them, just given the age of the bike and a lot of things that they may need. But there are some issues that are specific to certain model years and certain year ranges, certain engines, little things that you're going to want to be aware of. Because the last thing that you're going to want to do is go out and save a few bucks, get a great deal. I mean, it may be a great deal on the bike, but in the end, for you personally, it may not end up being such a great deal. If you're not mechanically inclined and you're really going to be taking this to a shop to have a lot of work done to it, those labor costs are going to add up really, really quick. So you really want to take that into consideration before you go out and get yourself a really good deal. Guys, please don't forget, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now, if you're brand new to Harley-Davidson and you don't have a lot of mechanical background or experience, buying an older Harley-Davidson may not be for you, because a lot of the older bikes, outside of the general problems you're going to have with any older used motorcycle, some of those Harleys, they're going to require a little bit more TLC. They may have some of the known issues in the bike that are going to need to be addressed pretty much, well, sooner rather than later. So let's say if you buy an older Evo, it might still have an INA cam bearing in it. That's not something that you want to necessarily leave in there and let it go. Evo's it's going to need a set of lifters, about 40,000 miles. These are simple things to do if you're mechanically inclined, and they really don't cost a whole lot to get them done if you're doing them yourself. But if you get a really good deal on this bike, you buy it really cheap, and then you've got to take it to a shop and get a lot of these things corrected, that's where your cost is going to make itself up. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid here. So when it comes to buying your first Harley-Davidson, you're going to really want to get something that fits your personality. And what I mean by your personality is, can you work on it? Or are you going to pay somebody to do it? Now, number one, if you're going to pay somebody to work on the bike, I would spend a little bit more and get something a little bit newer. Now, theoretically, the newer Harley-Davidsons have less issues than the older ones, theoretically, but for the most part, you're not going to have as many things that need to be corrected. A lot of these bikes actually run hundreds of thousands of miles without any issues. Are there known issues with every year of Harley-Davidson and every engine? Yes, there are. Do they happen to every bike? They do not. The main thing that really seems to get focused on is a lot of the issues with these bikes. You know, you have one bike out of 10,000 that has that issue, that floods all over the internet, and basically you kind of get the impression that, hell, it's going to happen to every single one of these bikes. Harley-Davidson really is kind of a pig in the poke, because not every bike is going to basically show up with that known issue. Now, obviously, if you have no problem working on things, you could get a service manual, you can follow the instructions and the directions, you have a little bit of that mechanic's feel, you can absolutely work on any Harley-Davidson motorcycle. But if you're going to do your own work, I will say this up front, there are a lot of specialized tools that you will need to buy, such as bearing pullers, installers, a lot of critical components. Yes, there are other ways to do it, but it may not necessarily be the safest or the best way, and if you get it wrong and you mess it up, you could end up destroying your cases. There's a lot of irreparable damage that can happen, and then pretty much you have a boat anchor, and you might have some good internals, and then you're looking for a new set of cases because you tried to jam some cam bearings in there, screwed it up, cracked the case. There's a reason why they make specialty tools for a lot of these things. Now, if you're looking for your first Harley-Davidson or a new-to-you Harley-Davidson, take a look at what you're willing to spend. Are you willing to take this to the shop to spend some money to get it back where it really should be? Because you don't want to let things go on a Harley. If you got an issue with it, if it's making noise in the engine, you really don't want to let that go. You want to get that fixed as quickly as possible, because if you let it go, things come apart, they run through the engine, they cause a catastrophic failure, and by catastrophic failure, that doesn't always necessarily guarantee that you're going to be able to reuse your cylinders. You may not even be able to reuse your cases. So letting any minor issue go can become a huge problem later, and that $8,000 deal you got all of a sudden is going to turn into $12,000 by the time you get that engine all rebuilt and get it rebuilt correctly. Because the last thing you want to do is, if you're going in to rebuild the engine on one of these bikes, is just kind of half-ass it. You really don't want to do that, because you're going to come back and spend probably double the money to go back and correct the issues, rebuying parts, and redoing the labor. And that just gets exponentially more if you're paying somebody to do it. Now, I always recommend, if you're brand new to Harley-Davidson and you don't really like to work on things, I would definitely say get something newer. And by newer, I would honestly say get something that's probably in the 2012 and up range with the Twin Cam 103. That last generation of the Twin Cam 103 was probably the best Twin Cam engine that ever came out. They're very reliable. They got a lot of the quirks, a lot of the issues worked out on them. A lot of the press crank issues. Yes, they still have the run out, that crazy high number of run out. But those bikes have seemed to do very, very well for the long haul and have really required a lot less maintenance and major overhaul. Now, you go back to the 96, that would be my second choice. When it comes to that 96, really compensator, there's some issues maybe with the 6-speed transmission, but I would definitely recommend getting that first generation of the automatic primary chain tensioner out of there and getting an automatic in there. That generally solves a lot of the known transmission issues. Now, everybody loves the Twin Cam 88. You get the Twin Cam, that's a good motor, and it really is a good motor, but even with the spring tensioners in there, I know we've talked about this over and over and over again, but you have to check those. You have to pull the cams out. You need to look at those tensioners. It's not so bad on the bikes 2003 or newer. They seem to do a little better. But once again, it's really no guarantee on what it's going to look like. Now, especially if you go back to basically 1999 to 2001, those 88s have a lot of high points in them with the Timken bearing bottom end. They have a better crank in them, a more solid crank. Kind of depends on what school you come from, whether you like the old bolt-together crank or, well, I don't really know of anybody that likes a 3-piece press crank. But those bikes, they generally go for a lot less. They have some good high points to them, but just something to be aware of. Those bikes were horrible on the cam chain tensioners. Now, a lot of times they go out, they get a new updated cam chain in it and a new spring tensioner in it, and they seem to do pretty well. But once again, it's no guarantee on those bikes. Now, even though they go cheaper. Now, Evos, I do love the Evo engines. They're great motors, but I would highly suggest that you have a little bit of mechanical knowledge on those, because generally, they're going to need a little TLC. Maybe a new inner cam bearing, maybe a set of lifters. Then they do tend to develop some leaks, and they're not hard to work on, but having to do a base gasket or top end gasket, anything like that, if you're not very knowledgeable about working on motorcycles or any engine in general, this may be something to avoid. Yes, you can take it to a shop. They do these day in and day out. Most of the guys working in an independent shop on an Evo, they can do this with their eyes closed. But just because it's easy and quick for them to do doesn't mean you're going to get a discount on the labor. You're still going to get charged the full price on that. So guys, if you are looking at buying your first Harley-Davidson, I really want it to be a memorable experience for you, a good, memorable experience, not the worst experience of your life that you went out and spent a bunch of money on it, you're super excited to get it, and then all of a sudden you're developing oil leaks, ticking noises, all kinds of other issues that basically might be expected in an older Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and then you take it to a shop and you have to dump a bunch of money in it. I've seen it happen time and time again, and I don't want that to happen to you, especially if you're buying your first Harley-Davidson. Because if you're going to come into the Harley-Davidson family, kind of join the club with all of us, we want you to have a good experience. We don't want you to go out and buy one and then absolutely hate it and say, I'm not going to ride anything but a Honda for the rest of my life. That is definitely not something we want to happen to you. But anyhow, guys, let me know in the comments, do you prefer to go with an older Harley-Davidson, or do you prefer to buy something a little newer? Got a little more features, a little more tech, a little more creature comforts on it, maybe even got some of the issues in the engine straightened out from the factory that the previous generations had. Let me know in the comments which way you prefer to go. But anyhow, guys, I hope you had an excellent Thanksgiving. Happy Black Friday to you. Hopefully you got out and got some deals. And if you didn't, I hope you stayed home, stayed safe, stayed out of all the madness. But anyhow, guys, don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. But until next week, guys, you stay safe on the streets, ride smart, dodge those cars, and I'll catch you guys back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.